session, which is a panel discussion. I will explain shortly what the meaning of all this is. I have thank you. You can hear me? No. No? Should be louder. Yeah, that discussion concerns the conference declaration, and we should address three main questions in this discussion here. The first is money creation really in national hands? That's the first question. One. The second is which scale is optimal for currency, local, national, global or sectoral? And the third question is, can modern technology enhance the efficiency of the monetary system? So all these three questions should be discussed by now 5 panelists. And I enumerate them first. Mikey Hudson. You know already him from his presentation. He's professor of economics at the University of Missouri, and he is president of the Institute for Study of Long-Term Economic Trends. This is very shortly the introduction for you. According to my papers here. That's right? Yeah. Then is Christian Arnsberger. It's a German economist with a doctorate in economic science from the Catholic University of Louvain, and he's a researcher now in Belgium, as far as I can see here. The third person is a lady. It's Margaret Kennedy. You know her already from yesterday. She is an architect, an ecologist, and a financial expert and a critic of the prevailing economic system. She has she works still at the University of Hanover at the architectural school, and has published many books, many important and influential books. So this is a short introduction for you. Then we have Ivo Schlaus. He is president of the World Academy of Arts and Sciences. He's a member of the Club of Rome, and he is active also in a private university here in Zagreb, in Croatia. Then Miro Đurović, he is Professor Emeritus for Electrical Engineering, University of Montenegro, and is President of the Montenegrin Academy of Sciences and Arts, and also a member of the Club of Rome. Finally, we expected Jean Maillot, a Spanish former minister, but he is not, he didn't come as far as we know. If he is somewhere, please join the panel. If he is not here, so we are 5 panelists, and according to the presentations until now, we can group also these 5 panelists more or less and roughly. The question, the general question, do we need an alternative monetary system? This is the main heading of this discussion now. We have some which tend to be pro the need of an alternative monetary system, and some of them they are against or tentative against. Pro is Michael Hudson, Christian Arnsberger, and Margaret Kennedy. Against or contra is Ivo Schlaus and Miro Momir-Djokovic in the tendency, but not strictly. So I will ask first those discussants which are pro an alternative monetary system, and I start with Margaret Kennedy, please.
Shall I answer all three questions, or shall I? Okay.
You know,
okay. I
this is up to you.
Let me discuss all questions.
Shall we answer one question or all three, or what do you want?
Maybe it's better to have just one question to answer in the first round.
But the first question is money creation really in national hands? Is very simple to answer. No, that's it. because it is in the hands of commercial banks, and the central banks only issue a very small amount of central bank money. So I don't think there is a lot to answer. It's just, no, it's not in the hand of national bank. Not in national hands. It is not in national hands. It is not in the hands of the elected governments. Is that enough?
Yeah, I think for the first, yes.
Do you? The second question is just as easy to answer, in my view. Which scale is optimal for currency? Local, national, global, or sectoral? And I think it depends on what problem you want to resolve with, or what are you going to head for. The present money system has one specific goal, and that is to make more money out of money. And everything that doesn't fulfill this goal, whether it's social, cultural, or ecological, has not a very easy time to get at money. This is why I feel we need specific monetary systems that will fulfill other functions than just making more money out of money. That's the second question. And the third, can modern technology enhance the efficiency of the monetary system? Yes. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a clear vote for an alternative monetary system.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So I would like...
Yes, if you look at the system as a whole, yes, an alternative. Otherwise, what I want to specifically say that I do not agree with the term alternative currencies, because the main point is it's complementary. It is not it's not one alternative, first of all. It is not an alternative either. It is a complementary is something else than an alternative, you understand? And I much prefer that term to alternative.
Yeah, thank you. I ask the same questions to Michael Hudson, please.
I agree with everything Margaret has said. The problem is that the monetary system is part of the financial system. And what she was referring to was the financial system. And the financial system is based on debt, and specifically interest-bearing debt. There have been many arguments over the last 2,000 years about this, and I can understand the charging of interest as long as the interest is paid to the government. And Ellen Brown explained how the solution is to turn banking and finance back into a public utility. And this includes the symbiosis that the financial sector has had with the insurance sector, which should be a public utility, and with the real estate sector, where a land tax and a natural resource tax should be the natural funding of government. And the government, if the government were back into the role of the major lender, then the government could write down the debts to the ability to be paid. A government bank would not make the speculative, derivative, mathematical gambling that the private banks have done. They would not be predatory. They would lend primarily for productive activities in the production and consumption sector, not simply aiming at loading the economy down with debt, which is the aim of the commercial banking systems.
you. You want to speak about the third point, maybe? Can modern technology enhance efficiency?
I certainly would not want to take a position where the aim of modern technology, including a phone system, is to make rapists more effective, more immune from the law, and to load the economy down with debt even more efficiently and lethally.
Thank you. That's also very clear. In some, you are pro.
Yes.
In some, definitely pro. So it's now Christian Amsberger, the same three questions.
Yes, thank you. Maybe the third first. I think, can modern technology enhance the efficiency? Of course, it's done that for the past decades. We know it can, right? So that's not so much the point. I think it depends very much on what we mean by efficiency. If we take efficiency in the sense that Margaret defined it this morning, as opposed to resilience, I think the more important question is, can we find technologies that increase the resilience of our monitoring systems? Efficiency, we have way enough, we have way too much of it. So it's not a good question, I think. That should be rephrased. The efficiency of the monetary system just means more of what we have now, which means a very efficient system. Okay, so is money creation really in national hands? Well, of course I understand exactly what Margaret and Michael have said, although I would say no and yes. No, in the sense that they have explained. Obviously, money creation is being carried out by private actors, i.e. Banks. But actually, they have I would say, plainly public mandate. There's nothing that, is not in the hands of public or collective institutions. By that I mean the fact, as Ellen Brown has reminded us again, the fact that banks have been creating money for so long has been a sort of political, geopolitical decision from the beginning, right? And so, in fact, yes, money creation is in national hands, except the way that our public decision makers have delegated, that's really the word, delegated money creation, the creation of a public good to private actors is, to me, the problem. That delegation should be taken back in part, and that is in itself a political decision. We know it's difficult. We know it's bound to be a struggle with lobbies and various power relationships. But that's the story of all sort of sovereign taking back of sovereignty is always a matter of sort of reversing certain delegations that we've made. There's nothing irreversible about it in principle or in practice. It just might be very difficult. But so yes and no. Now the second question. Well, the scale for currency is indeed all of them: local, national, global, and sectoral, depending on what tasks we want the currencies to fulfill. And I would say. Also that I'm opposed to this idea of an alternative monetary system. We need a complementary monetary system. We need what Bernard Lietaer has been for decades now calling an ecology of currencies, which means, I would even say, an ecosystem of monetary mechanisms, as I explained this afternoon, sorry. Banks can continue to exist. They should just be channeled toward very different objectives. We need complementary currencies. We also need public monetary creation. There is, in principle, again, nothing insurmountable about engineering these changes at various levels. I mean, the paper I've distributed on Swiss currency reform is an example and point about how we can try to think about it. There are many other people who are thinking about it as well. It's all very difficult due to the ingrained character of the prevailing system. But if that stops us from thinking about new modalities, then why are we here anyway? So I think that shouldn't stop us. It's just, we're just in the initial stages of thinking about a new evolutionary step in the system. It's not an alternative system in the sense of suddenly, that's maybe my only point of disagreement with Michael. He's probably a more revolutionarily minded, pragmatic than I am. We have different sorts of pragmatism. That's the problem within the alternative movements, you know. People don't agree about that. But so yes, I'm also pro, definitely.
Definitely pro, yeah. So we switch now to the contra, and maybe it's Ivo who can start now.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First of all, is it okay now? No. Okay? Yes, all right, fine. All right, this little technology works, so to immediately come to the question, should we try to use modern technologies? By all means, yes. Should we try to use modern science in anything? Yes. Now, Eric put us Amir and me in a position to disagree with the only lady that we have in a panel, and I absolutely cannot do that. I mean, it's beyond, of course, what I can do, in particular because I do agree with more or less everything that Margaret said. So I will try to say the same thing in a different word. We just heard about, whatever it was, half an hour ago, Hazel Henderson, who said that money is information. And some of you may recall that yesterday I was drawing some analogy between money and language. Now, the situation I think we are today with money, it will be the same thing if from all of the languages, not just from the English language, we would expel all the words except those that are designed to hurt other people and that are essentially insulting words. This is where we are now with money. Money is, in my opinion, not fulfilling, in many cases, its needed task. And that is rather bad. So we have to, there is no doubt in my mind that we need something to change the system as we have it today. To call it an alternative, and I think that this is where we are supposed to disagree, again, since both Margaret and Christian said that they are not in favor of alternative but complementary, my view is exactly that. I mean, not an alternative, because an alternative is basically to replace party A with party B in some of all those ringispiels that we have been playing in the political sense. So that is definitely one of the very important questions. Now, there was actually a very subtle point that I would like raised by Christian now, where he said that basically the mandate, of course, has been given by the people to the practically commercial banks to do certain things, and that is in a way sort of reasonable. Now, the argument of the mandate, or to be precise, I think the word is the mandate of the heaven, was used in the Chinese history to say that the mandate of the heaven has been taken away from, and then of course when the revolution came and replaced one dynasty by the other dynasty, this was something that it has the justification of the heaven. Okay, now I think we are playing the role of the heaven. We have to really find something that would be much, much better than what we have at the moment, and it's not clear how. When I say we, by all means, market itself, of course, is a fairly democratic process, because even if you are a tiny minority, you decide to do certain things. So we should not throw away the good things in the money, the good things in the market, just because we don't have quite a satisfactory market, nor we have a satisfactory money. And we should not try simply to replace one with another with all of these things. So in my opinion is we are there to use, and let me now try to answer all of these questions. Partly I answered the question number one, following Margaret and Christian. And then can modern technology enhance? Yes, I definitely think it is our duty to incorporate whatever science has done in all terms when we speak now in the domain of economy. As I said yesterday, I'm a physicist, and one of the standard jokes that I typically say is that physicists turn out to join the field of financing in a massive number about 10 years ago. And as a result, I joke, we had this enormous crisis. Why? What did physicists bring into economy? They did two things bring with them, very important. Definitely a knowledge of mathematics. And just to remind you, Jan Timberger was a physicist, and several other econometrists were either physicists or mathematicians. Nash was a mathematician, and so on. Okay, so they brought that. They brought also the knowledge of making models. That was already questionable things, because in making models, they missed one very important thing, what all physicists know when they physics, and that is nothing is sacred, so it cannot be challenged. They took everything in the basic tenets of economy not to be challenged. In physics, they challenge time, space, energy, conservation, determinacy, everything was challenged. So I think we are now in a position equally to challenge everything in economics, and to do it by really thinking out of the box, which is not easy.
Thank you very much. It's now Romeo, please.
Yeah, thank you. It is really hard not to agree with Ivo. And very difficult not to repeat something what he said. But coming to the questions, first, we have to agree what's alternative. Is that new? Is that something what is going to be used in parallel? Or is that something what Ivo said would substitute the certain parts of the system? We all know that nothing is working perfectly today. And we all know that we are on a sort of the crossroad, never experienced in the history of this civilization. And I personally think that we are looking for the new values. And when we define new values, then we'll define alternative or new monetary system. Definitely, it doesn't work properly for all the human beings on the earth. So some are, as you, I think, Margaret stated, 10% are very happy, everyone else is not happy. So I'm in favor of looking for new values and building a new, not alternative, a new system, monetary system. As far as the money creation and national heads, I really don't know anymore what's the national. I can think of the state ownership. National is the term from 19th century. And I think that we are not anymore living in the national states, even if that's USA. We are living in the regional states, and we are going more and more to live in the regional states. So I don't think that anything in the proper system is in national heads. That is, if that's in the national heads, then it's in the hands of the, they might be elected politicians. So I don't think that there are really people who should define the value of the money on the national level, especially if we all know that there are now frontiers behind us. No one can stop us to travel to other countries, no one can stop us to communicate to other countries, and so on and so on. So what it means being in the national heads, that means really, since money, in my view, is the measure today of everything. It has become measure of everything, not only economical term. We measure everything by money. it is very dangerous to agree that measure of everything should be in national hands, even if that's China with 1 billion and a few hundred million people. So I wouldn't really support having money, value of the money just defined by politicians in the state. And that really relates to the scale of the optimal currency. That's a very tricky question. If you, for example, consider Czech Republic, they refuse still to use euro because of the benefits they have using crown. But that's completely different to some African country. So that is a really tricky question. Would you have a scale on the regional, national, or on any other level? I know, I used to live in a country which currency was not convertible. So that was a huge problem for us. That was a huge problem for industry, for all countries and everything. We are all fighting for the currency which is convertible. If currency is convertible, that's a new currency. So I think that is not easy to say, especially having cases like on one side say European Union Hungary and on the other side Czech Republic. And coming to the last question, modern technology. Technology will do what human being likes it to do. Still, we do have artificial intelligence in technology, especially in the algorithm for making decisions. But definitely technology is going at this level we have now to do what we want. It is not going to create new solutions. It's not going to increase efficiency if we don't design that to increase efficiency. It's not going to be rational if we don't design that to be rational. So that's generally misunderstanding at this point of our development, what technology can do. Basically, technology can save time at this moment and save human being working hard jobs. In future, definitely, technology is going to have artificial intelligence and do many things which can be even better substitute than what human can do. So at this point, there is a lot of fuss what computer has done in administration. There are many studies which prove that administration hasn't increased efficiency all around the world much with using millions and millions of computers. So that is, again, a question what we want technology to do in the economy, in monetary system, finances, and everything else. Definitely, it will do certain things easier, it will trace certain things easier, but that's not the problem, doing by hand. So I would not believe at this moment that technology can solve the problems we have. It can help us, but not solve the problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Until now, we have more or less similar views on the second and the third questions. All those who are for or against an alternative monetary system find themselves a bit in approximity concerning the optimal scale of a currency and the role of modern technology. We have also an important difference in the discussion. The name alternative monetary system and complementary system is one important point I think we should take up later on. I would propose another questions. We have today and tomorrow working groups on alternative monetary system and energy currency. And I think it is useful that all the discussions here say something about this question, alternative or complementary or a mixed system, and the energy currency, which is quite separate from the first questions. Maybe we start again with Margaret.
I think that what we need is an ecosystem. It is different currencies for different purposes, and I want to say that it might well be that an energy-backed currency could be very trustworthy, because money is what money? What else is money but trust? And could be a very successful option. But what I would resist and what I would not agree with is like a statement here that would say this is the option, this is the solution. And that I would definitely, I could not sign a declaration that would make a statement like that. I really believe that what we need to look at is what use is a currency for us. And I want to give you one example, which is my favorite example, which is an educational currency Bernard Lietaer has designed for Brazil. You see, that is a country where 40% of the population is under 15 years old. And they had a big problem with giving up everybody the adequate education. And so when the mobile phone industry was privatized, the government decided to say, okay, 1% of the bills that you are charging people is going into a fund for education. And within a year or two, they had $1 billion or 3 billion reais in this fund. And the question was, how do we best spend this for education? What is the best use we can make out of this money? Shall we give it to the most intelligent, to the universities, to the schools, to the poorest, to the whatever? And Bernard Lietaer came up with, I think, a very interesting proposal. He said, together with a partner who came from Brazil, they proposed the introduction of a complementary currency which is called saber, which means knowledge. And these voucher is a voucher system. The vouchers would be given to those schools that applied because they had a potential for higher education which could not be realized because there wasn't enough money. So these schools could apply for these funds, and they would give these vouchers to the younger students, who then could get tutoring from older students and pay the older students with these, or the students, the school children, with this money. And so this $1 billion worth of fund would move through the school system, and every time it would change hands, it would create that amount of educational use that was changing hands. And if you would think that maybe these vouchers would change hands in a year 5 times, you would make out of $1 billion worth of money, you would make $5 billion worth of educational benefit, right? So the trick with the vouchers is that they are going to be 20% devalued at the end of the school year plus 4 months, for instance, so that everybody knows if they keep them in their pocket, they're going to lose. And the interesting thing is that here you are, what you are, you know, in the normal money system, what is leveraging money? You're leveraging the profit. Here you're leveraging the educational use. And this is what I mean with intelligent use of one of the most ingenious inventions of mankind, which is money. We haven't really used its full potential up to this day. And my feeling is that people like Bernard Lietaer and other people who are looking at it in a new, fresh way are creating possibilities that nobody thought about. And if you would, for instance, create 5 billion reais or $5 billion in money, and you would put it into education, you would immediately create inflation, right? You would immediately lower the value of the money. But by putting this money in and giving it an incentive to be passed on, you are basically helping the type of goal that you have set yourself. And I feel this is the same with the energy currency, and I'm very sorry that Ludwig Schuster's paper is only now in your bag, because I think we would be able to discuss this whole question of energy currency on a totally different level if we had all been able to read it beforehand. But maybe there's another opportunity, and he's going to give a lecture tomorrow, which I think will show up a similar type of benefit for energy if we would introduce an energy-backed currency. So thank you very much. This was a bit longer than
Thank you very much. You enlarged the discussion considerably, and I would ask the following speaker to do the same if possible. Mikey Hudson, please.
Okay. I worry that an energy currency or a phone currency, such as Sean talked, will only work if you take energy and the phone system and deprivatize them, taking them out of the hands of the private sector. Now, I disagree very strongly that national governments have to be viewed as the problem. Of course, we all realize that national governments are corrupt. My own father was a political prisoner, so I understand that. However, national governments are also the only power capable of containing, regulating, taxing, and opposing the financial sector and the banks. An international group cannot do this. And in the 1970s, I was the economist for UNITAR, for Edward Irwin Laszlo's group within UNITAR to extend economics into systems analysis. When I sought to introduce debt into the system and proposed that the third world debts had to be canceled and that ultimately the debts could not be paid. This was in 1976 and 7. The Club of Rome insisted that I be removed from the project because it was viewed as an anti-banker project, and it was explained to me that the bankers run the Club of Rome. It's being run for the bankers, so don't let your good ideas be hijacked by the Club of Rome. This is a ploy by the bankers, and Ellen Brown explained how the bankers systematically have sought to hijack the movements of reform, and they're playing on the opposition of government in order to disable the only alternative able to constrain the bankers' power. You have to look at what we're doing not simply as an alternative currency, but an alternative to the banks that are trying to corrupt the system into something they can control internationally by disabling governments. And I would not want to be a part of this ploy.
Thank you very much. This is now Christian, please.
Yes, okay. Well,
I have one question, to be short, because we have maybe several rounds there.
okay. Yes, well, about the link between alternative monetary system and energy currency, I think, in a way, I mean, Richard Douthwaite wrote this a while ago, that in fact, most currency systems are intrinsically energy backed. I mean, the gold standard was an energy money in the sense that the energy, including human, which we haven't talked about a lot, at least in the plenaries, the human energy needed to extract gold, of course, determines how much currency can be circulated. And we can sort of generalize that to other energy goods if we want. I don't want to reach forward to Josh's and Ludwig's presentation tomorrow. I agree with Margaret, it would have been nice to have it at the beginning, because it would have given us some taxonomy, some discriminating criteria. One way in which energy currency can be a problem, and indeed I agree with Michael, especially if energy production is extremely privatized, is that, well, if you back a currency with energy, it's gonna, the fact is many actors are gonna want to produce more energy in order to induce the creation of more money, so as to create economic growth and so on and so forth. In a sense, that would go against much of what we are, at least those of us who are against the systematic growth imperative in the economy are standing for. So an energy currency in itself is not a solution. Types of currencies which are constructed in the way that I tried to show this afternoon, which is a currency whose use is going to hamper or cap the use of energy. That makes sense ecologically. So it all depends on what we mean by an energy currency, and I think tomorrow we'll have a much better idea. Now, about the role of...
That's not me.
Okay.
I prefer the public discussion is wanted. Just a few sentences.
Okay.
Very short.
Well, no, I don't want to.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Thank you. Now let's Ivo, please.
Why don't we have the public first here, the audience?
So, can we make a round, and we have the final round after having the discussion with the public. Ivo, please.
Okay, is okay now? Yes. Okay, I think the example that Margaret started with is a very good example where one uses the amount of money that has been created in some way, in this specific case, of course, through the advance of a new technology, the IT technology, as a very good way how to really enrich it rather than put it in a usual pattern of money-making money. And I think this is exactly what should be done. The situation similar to that, not quite identical to that, but similar, was happening in most of the socialist countries, of which my country was one example, where then the entire amount of so-called natural resources or the property of the state was given then to be privatized, and went to an extreme of privatization. And then in the process actually of this huge amount of money, while several of us were trying to convince that it would be important to put it in education or research or something like that, the pattern was to really enrich a very small minority of the people. And that was actually what was happening, creation of really very few wealthy people in some of these countries, and basically again using money to create money and nothing else. A comment to what Michael just have said, yes, I mean, there is no doubt that unfortunately the humankind has many enemies, and these enemies are, of course, as has been shown by Professor Rummel, national governments by all means, because they are responsible. You know, when you look at the 20th century, then the number is that in the wars, some 100 million people have been killed in the 20th centuries, and some 300 million people have been killed by their own governments, showing, of course, the inadequacy of their own national governments. Of course, you said your own family example shows like this. On the other hand, of course, there is no doubt that banks are also destroying people in a longer terms. And of course, one way, just like the nature does, is this combination of prey, predators, several predators, and so on, and keeping this. And of course, you made a comment that an organization to which I belong, like the Club of Rome, can in certain cases become a victim of policies that really is basically against, but it can be put into this thing, and that is certainly true. To take one other example that most of us belong to, we are, most of us, I presume, university professors or teachers of some sort and so on. And unfortunately, our educational system is very, very far from being what we want, because most of the educational system is actually teaching obedience rather than challenge. Teaching to do rather than to challenge. And at one time I was told that a story which happened, I don't know whether related to Pentagon or related to business or related to corporations in the United States, when one turned to another colleague and said, you know, I have a group of extremely clever, brilliant people, they don't think at all. So that was an idea, you know. I mean, they are brilliant, they can do whatever you want, and they will never challenge your opinion. And I think what we really want is constant challenging of the opinion, and that particularly is true in this case of money. Of course, concerning the important question of energy currency, I would really like to hear much more opinion about that, because as I said yesterday, just declaring that on a banknote, rather than telling if you give this piece of paper you will get 1 gram of gold or whatever will be written, if you give this paper we guarantee you 20 kilowatt hours, this is not enough. This is definitely not enough. We need more, we need better. And I would like to see, coming from this audience, really these ideas, and I would like to, and I'm looking forward to learn that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Momia, and then we open for the public.
Let me just start with Schreiber's book. When he wrote the book in the early 60s, I think, great journalist, he described how he visited owner of Mitsubishi, 90 years old gentleman who had a microphone here. And the first thing owner of Mitsubishi told to Schreiber was, I have to apologize why I'm going to speak in microphone. I have to save my energy. So, being a human being, there's no higher value than energy. But we are not talking here of the human energy. We are talking here, I would say, of bulk energy or primary energy. So energy currency is something what I would definitely enjoy, even trying to learn more on it. Just how it's said here, it is shifting power from some entities which have a power today to some new entities. Nothing else. We know that we are not equally distributed when the primary energy is concerned. If we want, it depends on what society we want to build. If we want to build a gay society where 10% of world population is going to be happy, rich and everything, then no problem. You can shift it straight to Azerbaijan, Middle East, Russia, and so on. So this is how it's stated in this declaration. I'm not certain that that's the best definition of economic values. It is just, in my view, shifting power from one societies, from one entities, which have power today, to another entities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're open now for discussions. I propose we take 3 votes first, and then we give it to the panel. Please, you are. That's over. Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon. Kieran Malloy is my name, from FASTA in Ireland. One question I'd like to put just to the panel, and it's really in relation to currency, because currency has been used to value, to place, if you like, a monetary value on human activity. But I would like to point out that so much of the human activity is done within a community without any expectation of payment of any form. It's just done as a neighborly gesture. And one of the concerns that I have is that often seeking to monetize rewards actually drives out altruistic type behavior that's carried out within a community. And it's, if you like, the hidden downside of trying to treat everything as a currency, whether it's an alternative currency or a complementary currency. And it's a comment I would like to make, and maybe some of the panel would like to comment on it.
It's okay. Thank you. Where's the technique? Other question, Raoul, please. Take mine.
So, as to the last question asked to the panel, I think I'm somewhat disappointed about the discussion. Why? I think the first question to be answered is, do we need a reference point in the monetary system or systems, as there was one until 1971? So, this is a basic question. And this is basic to me. And then afterwards, if the answer is yes, okay, or no, when it's no, then discussion is over. When the answer is yes, then we need a reference point, then one can discuss how that reference point has to look like before discussing about energy or stuff like that. So there are more options in principle. And that has to be clarified, to my understanding. Yeah. So that should be it. I add to another point that is today and also a little bit in the panel, the notion of the nation has been repeated. The nation state is old, the 19th century. Many problems are not bound to the nation-state concept. Although that the United Nations is built on a nation-state, a nation has a legal entity, and we see what the United Nations can do. Yeah? So I cannot understand that in the discourse of money and regional, etc., that the concept of nation-state with a central bank is still present in the discussions. So I have their problem. So this is put a question mark behind that. So that's all.
Thank you. Please. Over there. Last one.
So, Professor Grigory Feigin, the University of Economy and Finance in St. Petersburg, Russia. So, hello, Professor Grigory Feigin, University. So, Professor Grigory Feigin. So, Professor Grigory Feigin, the University of Economy and Finance in St. Petersburg. I have a question about currency unions. Practically, we have now a big currency union, Eurozone, with all problems, and we have a few small currency unions, for example, so in America, so Caribbean, room in Africa, and we have many plans in Asia, Middle East, and so on to create currency unions practically based on the model of Eurozone. My question is, what do you mean? It's necessary, do we need such currency unions? And what do you think about their future?
Thank you. Now the panel. The question hasn't been understood, please. Very short.
So my question is, what do you think about the future of all these plans connected with the creation of currency unions in Africa, in Asia, in South America, and so on? Do we need these unions, and what do you think about the future of these plans?
Though it's catched at least a bit, who wanted to answer?
All questions.
for all these questions.
I would just say a few words on a few questions, especially around questions. Really, it depends what you like. It depends what you want to build. I personally feel that the major question today is, do we want to stick to the traditional values, or do we want to change values? We only know that religious values, especially in Europe, Christian values, are something what we want to practice further. But other universal values, which have been defined by philosophers and others, I think they have to be re-examined. That's the answer to your question. Do we need to build an alternative or anything else? I'm not going to discuss your second point. That's identity. You know, we are old, and we don't appreciate that everyone of us, every human being has many identities, depending on the situation. But in my feeling, in contemporary world, the major identity is professional identity, not national identity, not sports identity, not computer identity, and so on. We have to change our opinion. We have to live knowing to work something. We spend most of our life doing professional work. So I'm not ashamed to say, I know my country, I know my nationality, but my identity first, engineer and scientist. And that's something we have to clear. Talking on the nationality, talking on the close boundaries, frontiers, that's past. We have all granddaughters, some of you have young children. My granddaughter is only 5 years old. She's a computer fan, 5 years old. Her identity now is computer games, nothing else. Yeah. And we have to think in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. It's now Michael and then Margaret.
I understand the question. It's should money be connected to a commodity at all? That's what we were discussing. And especially, should it be linked to a means of paying debt to a commodity? And as the discussion was evolving, it became, what kind of a nation or a government should we have? If government is going to be a financial oligarchy, then of course we have a problem, and the financial oligarchy wants to make an interregional government and impose itself internationally, essentially into a neo-feudal type of arrangement. Or should we have economic democracy? I think governments are an arena. Government is not bad or good as such. A financial oligarchy is bad, and economic democracy is good, but economic democracy is losing out to the financial oligarchy. I've written on this earlier this year in the Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung, but I think that we should realize that government itself is an arena, and that has made the currency issue into an arena and the debt issue into an arena. All of these things are in play at once, and we need to look at the economy and the government as an overall system, not take a part-by-part approach to this.
Thank you. It's now Margaret and then Christian.
I would like to address the question by Mr. Molori, who I understand wanted to know whether we advocate a sort of encompassing monetization of all aspects of social life by raising complementary currencies. And I want to agree with you. That is a problem. And I've experienced that firsthand in the community I live for 27 years now, where we have tried 4 times to implement a complementary currency to serve the community and the village level. And it was impossible because people said, I don't want to put a value on helping my neighbor to do this, that, and the other. And by always putting figures to something, it creates a social coldness. It is And I think the best person who has written about this is Charles Eisenstein, who is one of the real thinkers in the Occupy movement in the United States, who says one of the big problems we have right now is that there are hardly any more areas of life which are not monetized, and that we are coming to a point where this is getting really difficult. I mean, looking after elderly people, looking after sick people, looking after children, it all is being found out, and people are getting paid to do the job. All the things that have been part of the family earlier on, mostly women, and so on. And although we may not want to revert to earlier times, I think it needs to be, that needs to be one of our, how can you say that, one of our criteria too. Is this area which we're going to develop, for which we're going to develop a currency, whether it's energy or whether it's education or whatever, is the monetization of that area going to help, or is it going to hinder, for instance, neighbors helping each other, etc.? So I think there's a very good question, and it really needs to be part of our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
Hello? This is on, but it doesn't work.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with Margaret, although I think most people working on currency alternatives or complementary currencies are not people who think everything should be monetized, right? So, I mean, that's important to say. I think what we are working on is possibilities to bring exchange resources into areas where the mainstream monetary system is simply not going. That, I think, can go either way, but in many ways it is actually coming as a help towards what you were saying. And there are many examples where complementary currencies are, or whatever you want to call them, incentive mechanisms or exchange mechanisms, are actually reinforcing community in areas where the standard money has actually destroyed community. But of course, that doesn't mean we should measure everything, and I think nobody's wanting to do that. It's just that there are many cases, especially in our complex societies, whether we like it or not, where one-to-one exchanges, informal exchanges are not always able to happen. And so we do need mutual credit, mutualization. And I think these mechanisms of money or currency are simply to be viewed as ways which should be designed and well designed and so on to actually help the mutualization so that we as citizens can grow back into realizing how much we depend on one another. I think so. There's not an opposition between these things. Although I agree with Margaret, we have to be careful on when it helps and when it doesn't help. Now, do we need a reference point in the monetary system? I think that's just. I understand the question. I just don't think it's relevant because there's always a reference system. I mean, even in the so-called floating exchange rate systems, the idea is that money is going to be emitted. I don't agree with this idea. Okay? I don't agree with all reference points, but there is always one. The idea. Yes, those are two different things, right? So there is always a reference point in the sense that we have delegated to private actors the power to decide who gets how much money for which project to exchange what for what. Okay? So the reference point, I mean, Joseph Huber is right in saying currency is always backed. At best, it is backed by the total GDP that we are thinking will be engendered by the money we create. We may be wrong, we may be right, but it's always backed by some, I would call it dedicated currencies or predicated currencies. We can have either, okay? Now, that doesn't mean all these reference points are right. My problem with the energy money concept is that, as I said before, just the fact of backing money on energy goods or energy flows or whatever doesn't say much about what the intention of the monetary system is. If we want to create scarcity of the money, of the currency, well, yes, we can back it by many things, okay? But if by creating scarcity, we also want to sort of engender behavioral changes or to be, you know, reduce energy consumption overall for sustainability reasons, that's another issue. And again, probably we'll hear about it tomorrow in much more detail, and it's really too bad this is coming so late, but okay. Anyway, and now the last thing, nation state versus commons. I'm sorry, but of course we have many other levels than nation states. But I don't think, and I agree with Michael, I think we're nowhere near the end. I fully disagree with your statement that you don't understand why nation states are still being mentioned. Of course they're being mentioned, because they're the basic entity. If anything is going to be negotiated at world level or at supranational level, it's always by nation states, whether we like it or not. I'm not an advocate of nation states necessarily, but that's how it happens. Of course, and in that sense, nation states are the sort of basic. It's not a nationalistic statement that I'm making. It's just a pragmatic statement. You know, they're the entities which are going to negotiate, which are negotiating trade agreements. Which, you know, if we don't have the support of most supranational or international organizations to change the money system, forget it. And that's a pragmatic statement. It doesn't mean we're only nation states, but they're certainly one of the main actors still.
Thank you very much. We have already done 4 minutes more than planned. But as we have 19 sightseeing tour here, and the discussion is really interesting, I would propose that we take another 15 minutes for the discussion here, maybe.
We should vote on it, you know.
Yeah. Vote? No, not so much. That you can express your feelings about this.
And then be overridden.
Yeah, we'll be back to that. There are some questions still. We could take, let us 3 more, and then we'll make the final round. Yeah? Okay. You here, then over there, and the third one. Yeah?
Would the panel, my name is Shan Turnbull from the 40 Foundation, would the panel, my name is Shan Turnbull from the 40 Foundation, would the panel agree that the word complementary currency does not communicate the need to replace the existing inequitable, inefficient, monopolized, counterproductive, ecological destroying system that we presently have, and that you need to come up with some other words like a replacement financial system. But the word complementary currency, we don't want to complement the existing system, we want to replace it.
We did not get an answer to my neighbor's question from St. Petersburg about currency unions. I'll leave that to Dr. Hurdle to sort out. But my own reason for standing up is a little more complex. Do you agree with me, that's my question, do you agree with me that a reference point to all of these questions, not necessarily like the gentleman mentioned gold standard, but maybe the gold standard of economic democracy could be considering every question from the point of view of the sovereignty of the people, which is the left, as opposed to the veto of the oligarchy, which is on the right. I mean, that's, to me, a gold standard of economic democracy. We ought to use it, maybe. Do you agree with that? And my other question is, because lots of questions have been put up, which that could help to answer. And as to the question about the nation state, there was quite a lot of to and fro about that, and maybe you would agree with me that the nation state is by definition a protection racket, but that's quite okay. We need protection. And the people pay the state to protect them, but they don't get protected. But the state itself pays the monopoly capital, let's call it, the bank, and is itself quite well protected. So somewhere there's a problem. We pay for a service we're not getting. You know, should we go to the commercial tribunal or what? But that's my question, is what do we do about the protection we're not getting from the state? Because the state is not a problem. The question is, it should be serving us. Yeah, sorry, it's a question. Do you agree the state should protect us?
Thank you. The last question comes somewhere. Yeah, please.
This is hard to express, but I don't think we should. This is hard for me to figure out how to express.
It doesn't work.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is that good?
Speak much louder.
Okay. All right. Is that good? Can you hear? Can you hear that? Oh, that's it. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. I think when I'm following up on what you said, because the group that is most affected by not considering the wider volunteer and love economy as, or human existence economy, the activities of that are not paid in wage. The problem with that is the part of the world that you're eliminating from our traditional economic system is women and children for the most part, because they're the ones that make that very difficult decision of whether to work or whether to take care of their children. And when they do have children, they will take care of those children whether or not they're paid or not. And I don't know how, it would be very, I would like to form this in a question, but I think we should consider, we have to revisit this in a different way than saying that people are insulted by being paid for something they love to do. Because, I mean, priests love to teach religion, but they accept payment for that. You know, I mean, lots of people love what they want to, what they do, but they'll accept payment for that. We have to revisit this because this is affecting more than, I mean, it's half the population. And young women even today are making these decisions, even though they say that, okay, women have everything available to them. But once they have a child, they don't have everything available to them.
Thank you very much. So we have to close the session, except the final round that we should start here with Christian, Momir, Margaret, Ivo, and Mikey. Please. Take this.
Okay, well, obviously we can't each address all of the questions, so, but about Shan's question, I think I would stick to complementary though, because of course we should discuss it with Michael as well. What do you guys mean exactly by replacing, sort of a sudden, you know, changeover? You are bound, I think, to have, I mean, any proposal of an alternative is going to be complementary right now. And all the things that people are doing at local and bioregional level and so on are complementary. The idea, of course, in Lyotard and others, in my own work, and Margaret, I think, as well, is to say, let's organize the monetary system such there is an ecosystem, so that there is actually, if I may say this that way, fair competition between monetary forms, okay? That may mean sort of deconstructing parts of the power relationship. I don't see that it means necessarily within 1 month eliminating the complete power relationships that exist. That's all we mean by complementary. It doesn't mean we don't want the things to change. It means it's a different strategy, I think, from the one-for-one system change that has never really worked in the past. But that's just the state of my thinking right now.
I'll just say a case. This one is in front. It is. I will just tell you a case of my country, a very small country, and the monetary system. My country decided to introduce foreign currency. Although we are very proud of our nationality as a people, so we introduced Deutschmark when it was one of the major currencies in Europe. When euro came in power, my government introduced euro. We are not eligible to print euros. We have to buy them on the market. It is a very interesting case to examine what the small country which uses a foreign currency has gained and what has lost. I think we haven't lost identity, but we gained a lot since we want to compete with the today's world. And we can't compete with the local currency. And so that's probably a very good case to be a study case, to see what you can do, not just pursuing a power by the money. Thank you.
Well, I think the euro has certain advantages, and it may be good for Montenegro, but it may not be good for Iceland. And it may not be good for Ireland for some reason or another. I really feel that the main point I always want to get across is that this money system we have today is not made by God. It is made by human beings, and it can be changed by human beings. And therefore, the definition of the problem we are facing and looking at how money can help solve these problems is, for me, is the sort of main and first task, whether it is in the direction of energy, whether it's in the direction of culture, in what direction whatsoever. It is really important that we're beginning to get rid out of this prison we have built for ourselves, that this money system we have is the best, and there is no other way. And if we can get that across, and if we can know a few examples which serve particular purposes better than the present money system. And I'm not against the euro. I think the euro has a lot of value, and it is sometimes very difficult to explain to people the advantages of regional currencies, while they're so happy to go across the boundary to France and not have to change money, and suddenly we come along with regional currencies. But then you can see that the regions, there are some regions that profit from the euro and others that don't. And those that don't profit from the euro do very well in implementing their own regional currency. So this is really what I feel is the most important message that must come across. And I hope we can see tomorrow a few more good examples also dealing with energy.
It's always good to follow after a brilliant lady with whom I fully agree. But let me start first by commenting on what Christian said in the first round of discussions, when there was a discussion between him and Raoul about the term which is called nation state, or even more precisely, national sovereign state. And what Christian said. Actually, the important numbers we have are the following. One is we have roughly 5,000 cultures and 5,000 different languages in the world, and we absolutely want to preserve them. They are as important for us as biological diversity. So that is what we want. The other thing that we want is we want to preserve one unique world, because all our possible efforts to colonize, go around and so on, are much, much more difficult than what Columbus or Vasco da Gama or anyone of that did. So we are, in a way, reasonably stuck to this. Though I very highly support Stephen Hawking that we should invest the money, we should colonize the universe and so on, but that will be going for quite a slow rate. Speaking about sovereign states, and I think that the term nation is confusing, and let me tell you, for instance, during the wars and all the difficulties we had in former Yugoslavia, there were discussions, for instance, where people in Bosnia, I remember in 1995, absolutely could not agree with our American colleagues who came there and said Bosnia and Herzegovina is a nation. They said, no, we are not a nation. They said we are composed of at least 3 and possibly 4 or 5 nations. For nobody in Bosnia and Herzegovina is not a nation. Because nations are there totally equal to the concept of the cultures and the ethnic groups. And Bosnia, for them, Bosnia and Herzegovina, is a sovereign state, and that is totally different. Of course, when you talk to the Americans, states are California, Georgia, and so on, so we do have their authority. Now, the other thing, of course, when we speak about the so-called sovereign state, and I think it's good to use this term, let us not forget that now we have something of the order of a little bit more than 200. It would be better, I agree with you, Christian, it's absolutely unbelievable to have, let's say, 400. Definitely it's impossible to have 5,000, because such a system does not work. As a matter of fact, even this system of 200 doesn't work, and we have the Security Council with all of its shortcomings, which goes back to the time of the Second World War, where the veto power is very, very heavily condensed. So this is, in that sense, that is the reality. But let us not forget that the number of sovereign states has drastically changed due to the decolonization, and actually after the fall of the Berlin War, we had another 20 states that came, Yugoslavia split in 7, Soviet Union split in whatever, 15, Czechoslovakia split in 2, and so on. So this is the same. So this is one of the things we have to really worry and very carefully analyze how we want to do it. And then on top of that, I think we should not forget that we have, whatever the number is, of the order of hundreds, transnational companies that have whatever measure of their economic strength is, but is comparable or bigger than many of these states. So that is one of the things. And the question that finally, through the help of a gentleman who is close by, we finally managed here to understand that your question was, what do we think about the integrated currency like euros and like possibly currencies that would exist in any other countries of the world. And of course, the example that Mohammed said of his own country, and Bosnia also has the so-called convertible Deutschmark, So these are interesting things. And as I said yesterday, there were proposals to have just one world currency. Mandela was in favor of that, Hooper was in favor of that. But the question is, that this is why I started my words by going back to Margaret, is whatever we do with currency, it has to satisfy this basic rule. It has to be for human welfare. If it is not, as it is not now, is bad. How we do it to be in agreement with human welfare, we have to think about.
My final comment to the questions that were raised by Sean and others is that the financial system obviously is broken. The Canadian Postal Workers Union has a motto: if a job's not worth doing, it's not worth doing well. And we're not here to try to fix the current financial system, which is really a debt system. Regarding the role of the euro and the nation state, you have the European Union Troika is certainly not a good model. It sort of how not to do the system. It's run by the IMF and the European Central Bank on behalf of the bankers. It's been hijacked, and it's turned the idea of European unity away from the original socialist idea of ending war into a new kind of war, into a financial war against Greece, against Ireland, against Iceland, and certainly that is the antithesis, I think, of the kind of monetary system that we all want. Unfortunately, the US monetary system, the global monetary system that the United States is pushing through the International Monetary Fund is based on special drawing rights, SDRs, which in effect are US military spending. This is why China, Russia, and the BRICS are thoroughly opposing it, and even why China has realized that gold has one virtue. If there was gold to settle international deficits, the United States could not encircle Asia. The discussions I've had in Beijing with Chinese officials are that they have to save their international reserves in the form of loans to the U.S. Treasury to finance the U.S. domestic budget deficit and the payments deficit that are military in character. So the monetary system is based on paying the United States to encircle Asia with atomic weapons to say, if you don't agree to our monetary system, we will bomb you and we will start localist movements to break you up. That's how China and Russia view the world. That's certainly how Mr. Putin views the world. And that is antithetical to the kind of ideas that we're supporting, but it can hijack the rhetoric that we're using for this. And the question is, it's necessary to realize that the main source of money today is financing American military spending and the American takeover of the rest of the world. And if we don't put our discussion in that context, we'll be sidetracked.
Thank you very much. We have for this day. I thank you very much in the audience, especially the discussants, and above all, the speakers here at the panel. Thank you very much. I think I accumulated quite a lot of material for the conference declaration, which was the final aim of this session here. I can announce that we have still some information about the sightseeing tour, and I will give the microphone to our colleague.
Thank you, Erich. So, dear colleagues, those of you who have registered for the sightseeing tour tonight, there is a bus waiting already going to the Radisson Hotel, and from there will be another bus at 7:15, which will take everybody to the tour. So even if you do not stay in Radisson, but you registered for the tour, please join us for that bus going to the Radisson Hotel. Those who did not register but would like to be part of it, you still have this opportunity at our reception desk. So thank you very much, and see you soon at the tour.
For those who are staying at Le Méridien, there is a bus going to Le Méridien, and if you want to go on sightseeing, you can also do that. Sorry, if you are staying at Le Méridien, we again have for Le Méridien, it is the same. There is the bus going to Le Méridien, and we will then take you to the Radisson if you want to go on the sites.